MP for Milton Keynes North.
Will Forster, MP for Woking.
Morning, Lee Dillon, MP for Newbury.
Can I ask our guests to introduce themselves, please?
Good morning, Nigel Cates, Chief Ombudsman at the New Homes Ombudsman Service.
Good morning, Chloe Fletcher, Head of Policy and External Affairs at the Chartered Institute of Housing.
Good morning, Richard Smith, Head of Standards Innovation and Research at NHBC.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us this morning. This is our 6th evidence session into our inquiry on housing conditions in England, something that fills all our inboxes as members of Parliament with. Just wanted to start with a question in terms of the prevalence and severity of quality of new homes. Nigel, you mentioned that you've seen a steady, significant number of issues with the quality of new homes, including major defects, safety issues and problems with damp and mould. Can you tell us a bit more about these problems and how you're dealing with the quality of new builds?
Of course, so the New Homes Ombudsman Service, at the moment, is a voluntary service, so it's important to understand that context. And we cover, at the moment, about 60 or 65% of the market. So we don't see everything. And in fact, it's worth saying that we see the complaints we see are from the companies that have chosen to sign up, which you would think are the companies that are trying to do the right thing and have the resources. So there is a part that we don't see, which I'll reference as well. We started, we had our first complaint just about 3 years ago, and now we're getting about 200 complaints a month. So we cover the whole of the UK, but if you think about 200 complaints as an estate, that's quite a sizable amount coming to us. Complaints first go to the developers to see if they can resolve it, so the issues that come to us are the ones which developers are not able to resolve. And of course we see a huge range of different things. We cover sales, we cover sort of service aspects, we cover quality and defects as well. The majority of issues that we see are to do with physical aspects of the property or to do with the wider estate. Perhaps promised parts of a wider development, whether that's a playground or whether that's issue to do with unadopted roads. There is a theme that we see, because obviously houses are very complicated. They're built by lots of different people. They're built in the sort of wilds of the UK weather. The theme of the issues that come to us is to do not just with the defects, not just to do with snagging issues, but to do with a breakdown in communication. I think many customers can understand the fact that there might just be a few things to fix with a house, or there might be something that is not quite right at the time they take possession of the property. But they expect developers to get onto that really quickly, deal with it quickly. And the cases that come to us are the ones where the customers feel that they are completely let down. They feel that they're project managing things. And the impact on them individually is huge, in affecting their mental health, their stress, their well-being, and that of their family as well. So actually, even where things are not major defects, I think the impact on people is significant. In terms of the types of issues that we see, they can range from just a sort of aggregate of lots of different snagging issues through to safety issues to do with poorly fitted fire equipment. We do see issues of damp and mould. I should be clear that it's not on the scale that the social housing regulators see. These are new properties, but we do see damp and mould, and we can see that sometimes that's pervasive throughout a property.
And with the damp and mould issue, how quickly does that appear in new builds?
I would say that there's something that links the damp and mould issues that we see, but also the safety issues, that it's around that property was not properly signed off. So the build something's gone wrong with the build process. So in essence, that damp and mould has been there right from the start, because it's to do with the way that the materials have been stored, and the property is not fit for purpose from the start. Often it's exacerbated. I mean, obviously that's a huge problem for people moving in, but it's exacerbated because the developers, in some of the cases we see, have argued or sought to try to present the picture that this is a localised issue. It might be to do with the behaviour of the customer themselves, the occupants of the property, whereas actually on further investigation it turns out this is something that's throughout the fabric of the building. Because
there's a quote from the snagging directory platform used by snagging companies which commented that professional snagging inspections consistently revealed concerning patterns where fundamental building principles are being compromised in the pursuit of rapid completion. would you say that this is what
I would
you're
so
seeing?
the context is important. So there is a data bias. Obviously, the stuff that comes to us is the bad stuff that people haven't had resolved. If you look at it in the wider context, we probably see, on average, 1 to 2% of properties for individual builders. So 98 to 99% from the builders are things that are not coming to us. But yes, I would agree that for that 1 or 2%, which is critically important not just to the individuals but to confidence in the market, for that 1 or 2%, it often is linked to a rush to get to a completion date, not having proper sign-off checks, or often the checks in some companies might be done by the people that have built the property, so they're not seeing issues with fresh eyes.
Homework sometimes.
A little bit, yes.
Thank you, Chloe.
Thank you. I would just like to add on this point that the sector that I represent, the social housing sector mainly, we are seeing exactly the same issues in terms of the planning kind of requirements and the Section 106 agreement. So where housing associations or councils are looking to buy up some of these properties as part of the Section 106 agreements, actually they are finding as customers that they are facing exactly the same issues. So large numbers of defects coming out, but again that communication issue and not being able to resolve those problems quickly for the tenants moving in. So although we are talking about organisations being the consumers, ultimately the tenants of those properties are facing exactly the same problems as private homeowners. So we've absolutely seen that. The NHF survey last year showed exactly those kinds of problems and a real difficulty resolving those, which then ends up in complaints to the Housing Ombudsman service in our sector. We are also seeing, we've done a survey of members around the Section 106, and it's not just the kind of inbuilt problems of kind of quality that are presenting an issue. It's the lack of forward thinking in terms of the kind of build quality. So we're seeing that housing associations don't want to be buying properties with gas boilers because they know they're going to have to be paying to take them out again and make them more energy efficient. They're not the right size, they're not the right sort of type of homes, and critically sometimes they're just in developments that they know are going to be unaffordable in terms of service charges for the tenants going forward. So I just want to say that housing associations and the social housing sector as a whole is quite a large consumer of Section 106 properties. So we are very, very interested in these problems being resolved for everybody across the market, and it'll make a big difference.
Richard, people can't get warranties if there's so many issues with these, supposedly new builds. It's, how is NHBC dealing with this?
Yeah, okay, so thank you. So NHBC, we're a not-for-profit organisation. We have a dual role with warranty and building control, and we have a vested interest to ensure that homes are built right first time. I think that's the most important thing to say. What I would say is in the year ending to March 25, we paid £86.4 million out in claims. But that
How much was that figure?
£86.4 million.
Wow.
But that is over the homes that we've got on cover over a 10-year period, so about 1.5 million homes. But that actual figure has gone down to what it was. So some of the trends that we're seeing is showing that the quality is improving. Some of the things that we are doing at NHBC is we are actually we're investing £100 million of our own funds to develop development of training hubs and training academies for apprenticeships, and we have a target to build 12 of these hubs with 3,000 apprenticeships. So we're trying to do those sort of things to encourage and promote that build quality aspect. Of the builder satisfaction survey, 93% of new home owners would say they would recommend their builder to a friend, and 90% are satisfied with the quality of their new home. There's still 10% that aren't on that basis, but I think to put that into context, as what Nigel just said, it's unfortunate that small proportion still has a bit of an issue with the quality of new homes. But in general terms, we work with builders to promote construction quality, and getting it right first time to us is the most important aspect.
And of that 10% that are not, is that beyond cosmetic imperfections? What's the main issue?
Yeah, I don't have the full details of what that 10% is. It's the House Building Federation survey in relation to that. Okay. So again, it's probably more for Nigel to comment on from a new homes ombudsman point of view. Just to talk about our claims experience, we have a warranty that covers insolvency cover, so pre-purchase, so protection to a consumer if a builder goes into administration and a deposit is paid. We could either complete the property or refund the deposit. We have a 2-year, if not builder liability period, where the builder is responsible for any remediation during that time, and we would step in if the builder did not carry out their obligations there. And then years 3 to 10 is more major damage, where if there's a significant defect within the property, then either the builder would remediate, and again we would step in and remediate that as well. So there's quite a few layers in relation to that, so the exact figure on that 10%, I can't give you the full details.
Okay, no, that's fine. Lee?
Yeah, thank you. You said about it being 86 million paid back from 100 million. So that shows a drop in value, but it could show an increase in cases, but just a lot of lower level cases. So do you have a breakdown of what that 86 million was on? So was it major repairs or lots of minor repairs, so that we can see that trend data as well?
Okay, thank you. Yes, so I see your point there as well. So we work quite closely with builders to make sure that they meet their obligations in their first 2 years. So we are very careful to work with the right builders in that respect, that they can carry out the right remediation and whatever. My experience of claims is predominantly it's water ingress is the most common claims, especially in years 3 to 10. And more commonly, claims can manifest in years 6 to 7 when certain materials may have deteriorated a little bit at that sort of time. So water ingress in roofs is our highest claim area, and then water ingress to external walls is our second highest. And that's both in value and notifications. So we are just starting some campaigns on roofing because the Future Home Standard was launched a couple of weeks ago. And there's more of a requirement to install photovoltaic panels on roofs, for example. That's a path water ingress, so we'll focus on that.
Oh, thank you.
Would you be able to write to the committee afterwards with that sort of full breakdown?
I'll see what I can find, and we can.
Well, whatever you can.
Yeah, we can. Yeah.
Thank you. Sure.
The government's got a target to build 1.5 million homes as Parliament. The Ministry told us that a robust regulatory framework will ensure that commitment is delivered safely and sustainably. How robust is the regulatory framework governing the quality of new build homes, would you say? Open it up.
So shall I cover from a redress point of view? So we don't set the standards in terms of building regulations and things like that. That's for others. But I would say we've got the New Homes Quality Code, which is linked to the New Homes Ombudsman Service. As I said, it covers the majority of the market, but it leaves, if we cover 60% or 65%, there's 35, 40% outside of the market. So the New Homes Quality Code sets standards that go much higher than the law, and really importantly, it brings in the ability for customers to have redress, an independent, impartial redress from an Ombudsman Service if things have gone wrong, which I think is a really important protection, not just for the individual, but actually for confidence in the overall system. That works well. You can see that from the growth in terms of cases that we've got, but also from the efforts that the builders who have signed up have put into actually improving their practices, improving their customer care, understanding the root cause of issues, and fixing things. So over time, we will see a decrease in the number of problems. Where it fails, and there is a failure, is in the 35% that's out, and I would say it's not robust at all. You've got a patchwork of codes that are different, but in many cases just really replicate what people have in general consumer protection law, not specific consumer protection for new homes, and linked to quite a niche or narrow adjudication system. That misses out, obviously, that impacts those individuals, but I think there's also a big systemic impact as well. So you lose the eyes and ears that an Ombudsman Service can bring in terms of really understanding what matters in the real world. So you have regulation that can set the standards, the prohibited practices, etc. in practice, but the Ombudsman Service, if it covers everything like a statutory service would, sees what really matters to customers, what is actually going wrong, and is able to feed that back into a wider regime. So I think we lose at the moment in two regards. One, those people who just, it's outside their control. It could be geographic, it could be, it's just a developer that they've bought a house from, do not have the protections of a code and an Ombudsman Service. And then secondly, you lose the systemic benefits.
I would just like to echo everything that Nigel has just said there, but to say in that wider context, I think the government is doing some really good work in this area. It is getting better, but I completely agree. There are parts of the industry. I was sitting in a meeting recently where it was described as the Wild West. We absolutely support the 1.5 million homes target, but we need to ensure that those homes are built safely and at really good quality. They are going to be with us for decades to come, and it's really important that we get this right and we don't waste money and have to put things right in the future. I would say the work that Nigel and the New Homes Ombudsman is doing is improving things, but it needs to be mandatory across the whole sector. It needs to, in my opinion, or in our opinion, cover the social housing sector, affordable homes, the types of homes that social housing organisations are buying for their tenants. It needs to cover we need to get rid of permitted development rights that allow some developers to make changes to the office blocks that are no longer in use and really create what many are describing as the new slums of the town. I come from Harlow New Town. We have Terminus House in the town centre, which one of the residents described as a prison without bars. It is awful. We are creating in a new town that was developed to provide those wonderful kind of new homes that my grandparents moved into that were safe, quiet, airy, built well. We are then creating these kind of shoeboxes of no natural light, no room, no place to go and play if you've got children. We absolutely cannot allow parts of the sector to be left like that. So we need to make sure the whole thing comes together. The last thing I wanted to say on this was that the work on the single construction regulator is going ahead. It is incredibly complicated work. I think if quality was moved into that area alongside safety, we could see a sort of a framework or an ecosystem developed that could absolutely knit all of the existing regulation together, make sure every single home and tenure is covered, and provide that foundation to go forward.
And Richard, you talked earlier about the value of claims going down, but the NHBC Foundation has reported that historically increases in the volumes of house building coincide with rises in the potential number of defects and lowering of levels of customer satisfaction. I mean, assuming these homes do get built, we head towards the 1.5 million. Can't we expect that again? What problems might we expect as the rate of house building hopefully starts going up?
Yeah. Okay. First of all, NHBC, we fully support the delivery of 1.5 million new homes. It is a stretching target and it could be challenging to reach, but we are running various quality assurance sort of programmes. We call it our construction quality reviews at NHBC that goes further than just our risk management approach to provide development for builders on that. Going forward on that again, we want to sort of continue to maintain that quality across the board. So another area that we think is a real positive is the use of off-site construction and modern methods of construction, where there's more, if like, systemised housing based in factories where the quality control can be more consistently approached. And we're seeing that a majority number of the larger developers are now either acquiring factories or working in partnership with manufacturers of suppliers of various types of, I would say, panelised systems, so not full volumetric systems. But what that is then doing is providing much more of a consistent approach to construction, which is having that effect. The benefit there is that standardisation takes away that element of deviation on site, and that's where we see that there is often quite an issue there. And going back to the skills objective, we are putting that investment in skills because, again, it's in our interest that we get that right first time, because as NHBC we would pay out on claims and increase on that, which is not what we want to do, because that's a bad experience for for consumers.
Andrew.
Thank you. Yes, it's just a quick question to you, Richard. The NHBC provides road and sewer bonds, don't they, yes, to developers to potentially cover the costs of completing construction should the developer be unable or unwilling to complete. I've heard evidence in my area of where the councils are requiring 100% coverage on the bonds, and that's not leaving enough bond capacity for an individual house builder for the sewer proportion, and therefore the sewer bond would never cover the true construction cost if that had to be finished. I'm just wondering what your reflections are on whether that bond system is still fit for purpose, whether you think it's functioning perhaps as it was intended to.
So thanks for the question. I don't do that much on that side of road and sewer bonds at NHBC, but what I would say is at NHBC we've probably got the most robust process in place in relation to road and sewer bonds. It varies significantly from the size of developer, and the warranty provider can provide that offer that bond or that facility. There seems to be quite an inconsistency between local authorities about what is required. I would suggest that would be an area where there could be some focus to look at how there's more of a consistent approach across England in relation that road and sewer bonds are actually applied and agreements between local authorities, because I do believe that's quite variable.
Does that apply to utilities as well? But United Utilities versus Thames Water versus Severn Trent?
Yeah, so typically the road or sewer bond is the road and sewer in that street. Obviously it'll have an impact on different utilities going in there, but that will be more connected with that.
Thank you, Jen. Sorry.
Yeah.
Thank you. So in my constituency of Ribble Valley, we've had a lot of home builds in the last sort of few decades, but one of the consistent things I do get in my inbox is that sort of challenges of those snagging. So just as an opening question, how for the average person who's buying one of these new build houses, how effective do you think they find the process of sort of reporting and finding defects and kind of getting that resolved?
Slightly Ombudsman answer, but it's going to depend some would find it incredibly effective. Like genuinely, there's some of the builders we've been really impressed with the changes they've made, not just where they started 3 years ago when Ombudsman came in, but the changes they've made, the customer care teams they put in, the data, the way that they move data around, identify problems and root cause analysis, and it works. I mean, we can really see that in terms of the percentage of complaints that come through from those individual companies. For others, they would find it incredibly frustrating, and their emotional experience would be really excited. I've got a new house. No one's ever lived in it before. It doesn't have any of those problems. It's been, I've gone around the showroom, I've seen the show house, etc. And then they take the keys, they come in and they find, wait a minute, there's not just this problem, there's 20 problems, 30 problems. And I said earlier, I think people can get their head around that and say, actually, okay, I understand there's some things that need to be finished off, different degrees of seriousness, but it's when it turns into, I'm the one driving it. You've kind of given up on me, you took my money, you've given me the keys, and I'm now having to project manage 5 different subcontractors turning up, they don't turn up on time, we've got wrong communication, you're not explaining this, you told me this happened and it didn't happen, you've said that's fixed, I know it's not fixed, I'm standing in front of it. And some people's journeys goes from that super positive emotion to, not just a few months, but 6 months, 9 months, a year of incredible sort of pain. And they feel, we have this through the surveys, through the things that come to us, they feel, I wish I'd never had this. I wish I'd never got this property. I wish I'd never done this. So those people, as I say, important to recognise a small proportion, but those people are having a horrendous journey, and they will go and tell everyone else, and that affects the confidence in the overall market, and you end up with the percentages that we hear about of people who say, I would never buy a new build property.
I was just going to say 65% of large housing associations were reporting those sorts of problems with defects and then getting them fixed as quite frequently or very frequently. So that almost gives you that picture that they're buying quite a large proportion of the market, and again affecting the confidence that we've then seen with the problem of developers and then not being able to get rid of some of the properties. And in my opinion, the government then reducing the affordability requirements is the wrong solution to the wrong to that problem. It's actually, we need to make sure we're getting the homes right in the first place and rebuilding that confidence by developers working closely with registered providers and local authorities in the first place, and then we would be able to rebuild and get quality for everyone, including the private homeowner and the social tenants.
So at NHBC, we welcome the role of a snagging specialist. I think that's an important role, and it's my understanding that the majority of the developers that we work with also welcome the role of a snagging specialist. I think it's good for a snagging specialist to give an impartial view of a home before it is occupied by a purchaser. So there's a few areas that I'd just probably like to emphasise. it's a non-regulated sector. So there are two key organisations, the Residential Property Surveyors Association and the RSCS, that do this. Sometimes there is difficulty about what they measure snagging to. For example, with NHBC, with our standards, because our standards there, then if someone's buying an NHBC insured property, they've got something to measure it to. But if it's with another warranty provider that haven't got any standards, it's very difficult to say, well, what do you snag that against? So I think that's just something that is a focus area, I'd say, is that there probably should be some form of a benchmark or standard for snagging specialists, so it's quite consistent across the board.
Just to build on that, obviously the government's committed to introducing a new statutory single consumer code for builders. So, how far do you think those changes will go towards improving these protections?
In theory, it could make a big difference. I mean, it's working for the 65% of people that are covered. The code that's in place from the New Homes Quality Code is broad and encompassing around all aspects of the sale. But there will be some gaps, and the government needs to look at that. How does it cover people that have bought properties, private properties from social providers? How does it cover conversions? How does it cover refurbishments that result in extra properties? There's questions around wider estate management and things like that. I know it's not the snagging point you're making, but those kind of wider things can have huge impacts. So the code needs to be defined with the right scope so that it really picks up all of the problems. And the benefit of having a code is actually that it is flexible in the sense of adaptive regulation. So it's not causing unnecessary barriers or burdens for business. Business can have the certainty of knowing that there's a code in place, but knowing that that's going to be used on an individual basis. So I think it's the government. It's in the the ball is in the government's court, isn't it, to make this something that genuinely works to fix those problems.
Just on that, you've told us that in your evidence that a substantial portion of SME builders have not signed up to the new Homes Quality Code. So why do you think that is, and how do you think the government could increase that compliance?
So the numbers that have signed up is increasing, but it's a market that has a small number of very large players building 10,000, whatever it is, houses, and then this huge tail down to people that might build one house this year and no houses for speculative build next year. There will be a number of different reasons. So a lot of those firms just won't be aware of it. They will, their focus is on how many other regulations are coming through, how many different things that, it's a hard job, isn't it, if you're a small business trying to keep on top of every aspect of all the different laws that apply. This is going to be low down their level. Some of those will be fantastic builders, let's be honest. They're really close to their customers. They really know what they're doing. They'll have the best reputations. There'll also be some firms that just absolutely staying away from it, don't want to be part of it, don't want the burden, don't want the risk, view it as something that's going to actually harm them because they don't want to apply the higher standards. They're not consumer friendly. So I think there's a whole mix.
Do you think that those small number need to be required to do so?
Yes.
The government have to force them to?
Yes, absolutely, because it protects everyone then. Yeah. And the customers of those builders are the people that need the most protection, I think. But it also enables the data and intelligence to be all-encompassing and really pick up the worst practices. So it has to be statutory for everyone.
It doesn't just have to be statutory. I would just say it has to cover those wider kind of scenarios where a home is either sold under a shared ownership scheme to a social landlord provider, or as to an institutional investor who's doing a build to rent scheme, or an individual landlord, because we are all ending up living in these homes. It doesn't matter who's buying it, as it were. The protection should be for everybody.
And I think to the point you made earlier, it's that reputation of the whole industry that it's going to affect, isn't it? So it's in everyone's interest to get this right. Yeah.
Another issue that we have coming up is obviously building regulations and the impact that's having. Chris?
Start with you, Richard. How confident are you that there is sufficient building control capacity to effectively check the new homes that are being built in accordance with building regulations?
Thank you. So this is probably down to the fact that we've got the new building safety regulator now in place and whatever. From an NHBC point of view, we went through the process of registering our staff. We have in excess of 400 staff have gone through the building safety regulator. I am aware that there are in other parts of the industry a number that may have left the industry through for whatever reason, but we've managed to maintain the majority of our staff. So from a delivery of new homes, we feel quite confident that we've got good numbers to deliver that. So the area that I think is worth noticing is that the BSR, it's a completely new regulator from scratch. It's only a few years in, and there's been a few delays early on, but we're seeing signs of improvement and development there. So I think that's encouraging as well. But across the board, I do believe there should be more building control specialists in the industry across the board, yes. So, but we feel as though we're in a good position at NHBC.
You told us there was no nationally accepted quality assurance standard for construction in the UK new build housing sector. How does this affect the quality of new builds, and what do you think we should do about it?
Okay, thank you. Yeah. So this is an interesting one. I think you're right that I don't think there's a national quality standard for new homes. The one thing I would say is there's been a lot of regulatory change over the last 5 years with the BSR. My concern would be is if we brought in a quality standard now or quite soon, that's probably another layer of change which could slow down the plan to deliver 1.5 million new homes. So there's a balance between what comes in. I think that as an industry, we're already seeing some developments. Working with the new homes ombudsman, and if we have a new quality code and those kind of areas that can help developers or work with developers to improve construction quality that way, we would be supportive of a quality standard. But I would just a bit of caution about the amount of regulatory change that's happened over quite a quick period of time over the last 5 years.
Anything to add?
We would absolutely support a new base standard that goes across the whole sector, and the danger is that if we don't do it now, whilst we're trying to build those many homes, we are baking in those future problems that we're going to have to come back and taxpayers and everyone else are going to end up paying for, as the history of Grenfell unfortunately showed us.
I would just add from an ombudsman point of view, I mean, clearly we support the standards and, where they encourage innovation as well and not just sort of holding things back, but it's not just having the standard, it's whether that's actually built to the standard. So it's inspections, it's the right sort of process around that.
Just jumping back to the first question, are you confident there's enough building control capacity in Britain if we do end up ramping up to...
I think it's outside the scope of what we see. We definitely have allegations from customers that there was no inspection that took place. That there was one on the site, one house was inspected, and the other 10 weren't, or the one with the issues wasn't. Because of our role looking at individual complaints, I'm afraid we don't get to see that data, but we do hear that complaint.
We certainly hear a lack of skills and labour and concerns about an ageing workforce that are kind of going to be retiring in the next 5 to 10 years, and really need everybody to be working together. Surveyors are like gold dust, whether you're a housing kind of developer, maintainer, or in building control. And I think the LGA had a survey at the end of 2023 which was showing that the recruitment and retention problems were quite severe in that particular area. And what I know from local authority is that hasn't changed particularly.
To clarify, we inspect every home. So we carry out a key stage inspection process plus additional inspections. We're also bringing in our own apprentices as well. So we're bringing about 20 apprentices a year. We have a trainee programme, and we're also looking at an armed forces programme as well.
Thank you. Andrew.
Thank you, Chair. My questions are to do with the accessibility of new homes. Now, the Part M regulations, building regulations, came in 2010, I think. The previous government had a commitment that I think all new homes would meet the Part M M42 standard, although they didn't actually make any progress towards enacting that commitment, as far as we can tell. Nevertheless, this government, has, rather than mandating Part M42 for all new build homes, they're proposing that around 40%, well, at least 40% of new homes should be built to that standard. Chloe, do you agree with the government's position?
No, we don't. We would like to see that made mandatory across the whole 100% of new homes. We think it would actually benefit everybody who was working in new build, because if you're just building to one standard, it becomes the norm. That's how you will make savings and cost efficiencies. It also means that we are properly preparing for an ageing population and unfortunately a sicker population. So our new build homes are such a small proportion of the homes that we live in. The majority, vast majority of our 70% of our homes that we live in are pre-1980, with some of them quite significantly older than that. We need to make sure the new build that we're doing actually fulfills that huge gap. We know we've got people stuck in either own or occupation, social housing and the private rented sector in really unsuitable housing for them, which just stops them doing anything with their life. It prevents so many things like employment, just general well-being, and creates more health problems. So if we can do this and get the industry up and ready for that new accessibility standard, I think it would be good for everyone in society.
Nigel, do you want to say?
We see very limited cases on that, so let me just start by saying that. But we do see problems, but they're the type of problems that we see around accessibility. They come back to communication. So I can think of individual cases where someone has bought a particular plot in a particular house because it was going to have, let's say, a wheelchair ramp, particular access. And then the builders made changes without communicating that. And this isn't the type of, it's not a good, like a car or something like that you get the wrong one, you swap it out for the right one, you've got that property. And I think, just for me, it just highlights the fact that regardless of standards, regardless of the commitments, all builders just need to be on top of those communications and really understanding vulnerabilities in their customers and their customer needs.
Right. Richard?
Yeah, thank you. So, I was a member of the Building Regs Advisory Committee, and I know that there was a revised Part M in scope being prepared for some time, so we're just waiting for that document to come out. But I think there may be a direction of travel where M42 may become the norm going forward, but we're just waiting for the release of the guidance on that at this moment in time.
Okay, Chloe, the government said that their proposal would ensure the necessary level of accessible housing is provided while giving local authorities the flexibility to maximise house building overall. To what extent do you think that mandating Part M42 would constrain the supply of new homes, if indeed you think it would?
I don't think it would if we had a reasonable timescale to get there, and I do think that the long-term housing strategy that we've all been waiting for a while now is an excellent opportunity to set out a reasonable timescale to say, well, we could start at 40%, but by X date, that's when we will be expecting everybody to work towards that.
Okay. The government hasn't included a recommendation for a minimum percentage of new build homes that should comply with M43, although I think in the London plan they're requiring 10%. Do you think that the government should specify a minimum percentage of new homes that should comply with M43?
Yes, absolutely, and they should be all of them, so that we can...
Oh, all of them?
Yeah, we can move forward on that basis.
Okay.
Thank you. Climate change, another big issue. Maya.
Thank you. With the Charter Institute of Housing, you told us that new homes are not being built, most new homes are not being built to high levels of resilience to climate change, despite the likelihood that most of these homes will be in use until at least 2080. What impact will this have if it's not addressed? And with the Future Homes building standards, how far will that go to address the concerns that you've got?
So we're really pleased with the Future Home Standard as far as it goes, but we do want it to go further. I think there are, apart from the accessibility issue, the two kind of big issues on climate kind of sustainability are flooding and overheating. Feel like it doesn't go far enough on either of those two issues. Part O of the building regulations needs to be strengthened just to make sure that all the homes we are building now are actually going to be a safe safe in our future summers and existing summers sometimes already. I think there was a really good example from a housing association, Midland Heart, who have done a development of 12 homes as a kind of pilot on the Future Home Standard, really testing well with their residents on other aspects of climate change and energy efficiency, but still we're recording very, very high temperatures in some of our hotter summers recently, which shows that those standards don't quite go far enough for what we're looking at in the future. And then the other issue that we have, more I suppose strategically, we just don't feel that the new standards go as far as they could do. They should be having the MPPF requiring people to actually have regard to the Climate Change Committee's latest advice, for example, would be very helpful. Plus, we very much don't agree with the proposal to disapply the sequential test from homes at risk of surface water, because I think that's an issue that's going to be increasing over our warmer, wetter summers, and we need to make sure that in the round, planning authorities and developers are really considering where we're going to be looking at in the next kind of decade and years to come.
And if I could just ask on that, so I think, we're increasingly having hotter summers. I think most people in new homes now are experiencing that sense of there's at least days, weeks every summer where you can feel those homes are, retaining heat in that way. What do you think the blocker is, almost from a sort of the political will point of view, the public will of kind of what's really going to shift to make your argument? I think to the average person it makes sense. I think they can see that those homes are going to only get hotter, and that's the problem. Do you think it's just that there's too many other challenges, or what do you think is going to shift that dial to make it become imperative from a public will point of view?
It's a real change of attitude in all of us, actually. I think we've done so much, which is really great, in England and the UK more widely, tackling the cold and the energy efficiency issue, because we are culturally we know it gets cold and we don't like that. We are very unused to having incredibly hot summers, but we've created that problem by sealing up our houses and making them, more insulated against the cold. And we're suddenly realising, and I think this feeds into the damp and mould issue as well, we're suddenly realising that we do actually need that ventilation as well. And I think it's about developers and everybody, planners, building control people, ourselves, really fully understanding the role that some of our leaky windows were playing in that, in terms of keeping things cooler and building that into our new standards.
And if I may just finally, because Nigel referenced earlier that with damp and mould, often there's this tussle between individuals' behaviour within a property and the actual build of the building. With the temperature thing and sort of heat, do you think there is an element of public education needed on how to manage homes to keep them kind of more temperature balanced in summer, or do you think that it is on the whole a build question?
I think on the whole it's a build issue. I think there's a bit of education that comes around new heating technologies, coping with hotter summers and pulling our blinds, our curtains and having shutters and things. But actually fundamentally we can design buildings to cope.
Thank you.
Chris, I'll just ask one very quick question, Chloe, just following up from that. Running through this conversation, we've had a lot of these are extra burdens that you should put on house builders, reasonably or unreasonably, when they're building a new home. I mean, the other inquiry we're looking at is the affordability of buying a house, and it is also notable that almost nobody in this country can afford to build a new build house right now for a variety of reasons. But I would argue that one of them is that the specifications, the restrictions that we put, the rules that we put on what needs to be done in order to build a new home are so great that it makes it difficult to build enough of them at the cost that people can buy them at. So sort of in that spirit, while there's lots of things that I'm sure you would like to be new house builders to be doing when they build new homes, is there anything you think they're currently asked to do which is actually putting too much of a burden on them and adding too much to the cost?
I personally don't think there's any one individual thing that we're asking them to do. I think part of the problem is it's so fragmented and people don't have a clear idea, and some of it's voluntary, some of it's not. And actually having a longer term vision where you actually clearly tie it all together and make it easier for developers to produce one house that can be sold to an individual consumer, to be sold to a social landlord, or to be put into the private rented sector, that clearly meets a very basic, decent quality and is a safe home to live in, I think actually would make it easier in the long term, and therefore cheaper.
Just to comment on that, the one thing we commented on the NHBC Foundation publication about the effective delivery of 1.5 million new homes is that there needs to be a more structured approach to regulatory change. So I just want to give an example there that we may see a change. We've seen a change that's just come out in relation to the Future Home Standard. That could have an effect on the change of a number of house types. We could then see a change for M42, which would have a change on house types, and then we may have a change for Part K, which would have a change on house types. If those three regulatory changes came out at the same time, there'd be one change to house types. It'd incorporate the stairs, the M42 requirements and the Future Home Standard. So a bit more of a structured approach in relation to the regulatory changes, I think, would go a long way and help a lot.
Nigel, anything to add?
I mean, I would agree that I think consistency and certainty are what actually can really help with costs. But I would also say that having, I'll say it from the Ombudsman point of view, but having a single level playing field, having that certainty for all customers increases confidence from consumers. They buy more properties, they're happier buying those properties. It brings the sort of cost of the build down. So there are strong market effects that would happen from having certainty of regulation and redress.
Thank you very much. I think you've given us a lot of areas that we could include in our report. I'll ask the next panel to come forward. Order. Order. Welcome to the second part of our inquiry on housing conditions in England. Can I ask our guests to introduce themselves, please? Stephen.
Stephen
and Steve.
Stephen Teagle, Chief Executive of Partnerships and Regeneration at Vistry Group. Good morning.
Good morning. Jennie, Daly, Chief Executive of Teagle, Wimpey.
Hi, Steve Turner, Executive Director at the Home Builders Federation.
Thank you for joining us this morning. I'm going to start on the issue around the really ambitious target of 1.5 million new homes. Sarah.
Thank you, Chair. So for the rate of house building to increase to meet the target of 1.5 million homes, it would mean an average of 300,000 or so being built each year, and in recent memory the highest really amount that we've achieved has been about 250,000 a year. So do you think that that target is still achievable? And if so, will the sector be able to meet that target without compromising on quality?
I mean, it's going to be incredibly challenging. I think we're currently building around 200,000 homes a year. There's no indications at the minute of any significant uptick on that number. So we're well short already of where we need to be to hit that 1.5 million number. There's a number of significant constraints. I think, as was referenced in the last session, costs have gone up hugely in recent years. I think costs have increased by about £76,000 per home, whereas house prices, in terms of what you're selling them for, have not increased massively, and that's down to increases in taxes on development, increases in regulatory costs, etc. And of course, affordability was mentioned as well, in terms of first-time buyers in particular are struggling to buy. And without that level of demand, builders can't invest in new sites. So at the minute, it's very challenging to see how we're going to get upwards to 300,000 a year or to the 1.5 million. I think if we do, there's now a level of safeguarding in place to guarantee quality levels are maintained. I think what we saw in 2012, 2013 was a drop in quality when volumes went up. I think, as Nigel in the last session said, the Ombudsman is doing a very good job on the majority of homes that are built now. We need to see that sort of across the board in terms of 100%. I think he was first committed in 2017 by Sajid Javid that the Ombudsman and New Homes Quality Board framework will be put on a statutory footing. So we're very supportive of moves to do that, which would sort of ensure that those, if volumes go up, we can maintain that quality.
Just when you referenced there the increase in 76% in costs, since when, sorry, over what period?
That's over the last 5 years.
Thank you. Do you want to add?
Yeah, if I will try to add rather than repeat. In terms of the ambition, we have a significant and chronic sort of deficit in housing in the UK and in England, and it does deserve an ambitious target, I think, to galvanise all stakeholders across sort of housing delivery. But there are some fundamental foundations, if you forgive the term, that need to be put in place. The delivery of appropriate levels of land that are viable to deliver housing being one of the first, and therefore sort of the poor state of our local plan system, the lack of up-to-date plans, the fact that planning permissions have been falling sort of progressively over the last 5 years means that there's a considerable amount of work still to be done, despite the good work that government have introduced through the MPPF and other changes to ensure that there's an appropriate level of supply. The reason that I mention supply is it is also important, the smooth delivery of land through the planning process to development does support consistency and efficiency and productivity within the sector, and when sites are significantly delayed through the planning system, it does lead to very intensive levels of delivery, and that can sort of have effects on the ability to smooth labour sort of through what is a multi-trade sort of process, and it can at times put pressure on quality. So planning has more to offer than just the fundamental land, the consistency and readily deliverable planning. But to indicate, I believe that we can deliver 300,000 homes, not in the private sector alone, but across sort of a range of tenures, council house building, social housing delivery. But it also requires investment, retention of skills, and the cyclical nature of the sector can be a barrier to the confidence of consistently investing in those skills and in the wider supply chain, like materials and other elements that are needed to deliver high quality homes.
And to what extent do you think that the action that the government has been taking specifically on skills, there has been quite a lot of commitments around construction, skills hubs and a number of other areas, is that going far enough at this point? You meant given that you mentioned of skills there?
Yes, I mean there's a lot of active work being undertaken around skills and increasing skills delivery into the sector, which is very laudable. And Taylor Wimpey and I know many of our peer groups support both NHBC, the work within CLC, the Construction Skills Mission Board, the HBF. There are a wide variety of initiatives around bringing apprentices into the sector and ensuring that we've got the skilled workforce that we need for the future. But we are also in a period where housing demand, because of affordability challenges, is low, that potentially confidence is at a low point as a result, and therefore continuing investment in generating sort of uplift in skills when the uplift in demand is not visible, then that becomes a challenge for businesses.
Going back to your first question, I think it's an ambitious, absolutely necessary target. And I think as a sector, we can meet it. I think the government has put in place some very strong and unprecedented supply-side initiatives. And in the affordable sector, Jennie mentioned the need for diversity of tenure. In the affordable sector, the demand-side interventions by the government, increasing the capacity for housing associations and local authorities, and the announcement of the £39 billion social and affordable housing fund really will be instrumental in trying to lift the output to the 300,000 level. So I think the government is to be applauded with what it's done in its first 2 years of office. In terms of skills are really important in us ensuring that we do manage the risks around increased volumes in terms of quality, which was the second part of your question. There are many ways in which we face into that. The first is I think we have seen over the last 2 decades a combination of regulation and a focus on quality assurance and customer expectations drive quality improvement. I think from our perspective, some form of national quality assurance would be very welcome. Skills investment is key, and the government's announced its investment and skills mission, CITB reform, its construction technical excellence colleges. There's a range of measures the government are taking which can be delivered hand in glove with the sector's investment as well, which I think is really important. That will help. Our own self-help focus has to be around improving our accountability, not only to our customers who purchase individual homes, but to our partners in respect of the homes that we deliver. We've spent some time over the last 2 years introducing something that we're very proud of, which is our partner journey, which focuses on the very issues that rose in that first session around the quality of affordable housing. Over 70% of the homes that we deliver are for affordable or institutional investors. And so making sure that we are managing the quality efficiently, hand in glove with our assurance colleagues, but also in terms of our own processes is very important. So I think there are processes that we put in place to avoid that risk as volumes increase. And I think there are routes to do that and do that successfully.
And I assume that is will demonstrate significant value to the business over time because you're reducing cost by having the systems in place earlier and being preventative in your approach to that stakeholder engagement. That's
absolutely right. The investment in ensuring, and it's a circular investment because you're doing more work with your partners going forward as you lift delivery. So that circular investment is very helpful, and it absolutely ensures that our partners can see that we're delivering to the quality that they expect. Another aspect to that came up earlier was standardisation. So by going down the route of standardisation, you're also ensuring that you are mitigating the risks associated with quality issues because you're not building bespoke homes where there are often issues that arise that are not being foreseen.
Thank you.
No, and I think that's welcome to hear, Stephen, because I think in essence there would be a situation where some consumers, residents feel that the quality of social homes in comparison to the private homes that are sold are not on par. We had a situation a few years ago in London, where essentially they were termed as poor doors, where the entrance of some buildings which housed the social tenants was very different to the ones where private tenants were buying that. You had a situation where in some developments, the social tenants weren't allowed access to the play area and the quality of the play area between the two. So I think, why do you think there's reluctance in some of the other builders and developers not following the role and areas that Vistry is doing?
I think as we see an increase in the percentage of affordable homes, as we see an increase in the delivery of build-to-rent homes using institutional investment, that will lead to diversity across the house building sector in terms of delivery and familiarity with different tenures, and that will naturally drive up the quality issue. One of the things we've done, which is replicable, is we've developed our own survey for our partners, which mirrors the NHB survey in terms of asking for quality observations on build quality, on handover and service delivery before and after. And we've applied a very similar metric to the NHBC individual open market customer purchase process. And that has really drawn dividends for us. We've seen, since we started to monitor the performance and the quality that our partners are receiving, we've seen an upward trajectory in the quality that we're delivering. So I think measuring it as an industry is a really important first step to then drive improvements.
Thank you.
Sure. Link back to a question asked at the first panel. We've been told that the 1.5 million homes can be delivered safely, sustainably in terms of quality because of a robust regulatory framework. Now, the New Homes Ombudsman Service told us in that same session that they don't see it as robust at all, or, to quote. Do you agree?
I think there's frustrations in terms of, and the New Homes Ombudsman, I think, was referring to the fact that it's not a mandatory requirement for all home builders to be part of their framework. So you've got, at the minute, a rump of the industry, sort of 60-65% of the industry who voluntarily signed up. And I think, it's quite evidential that that is driving behaviours in terms of their levels of customer service and build quality. What I think we need to move towards is a framework that requires all developers to be onto the same framework and be covered by the remit of the New Homes Ombudsman, because it's quite clear that does drive behaviours in terms of how you deal with your customers.
Okay. And for Taylor, Wimpey and Vistry, can you talk more about some of the systemic pressures that affect quality of new builds? I'd just be interested if you could lay that out a little bit more.
Well, the responsibility for quality starts with the house builder, but we are part of a value chain. So the work that we undertake starts with our technical specifications and procurement of materials. So we work with our sort of material supply chain. They train our teams on site. We feed back sort of any issues that we may see. We have construction specifications. Our teams are trained. Our tenders require our subcontractors to deliver in accordance with quite detailed construction specifications. We have our own quality managers in every one of our businesses, site managers, and oversight on each site of all of the trades. We require the majority of trades to have supervision on site. We have build quality checklists. As you heard from the NHBC, we have key stage inspections. There are also other continuous improvement work that we do alongside the NHBC, whether that's construction quality reviews, training, sort of through again the whole of sort of the supply chain and the sort of the project flow for delivery. And then there is the warranty sort of provision again that the NHBC outlined, both dealing with sort of pre-completion, the initial completion sort of period of 2 years for which the developer is wholly responsible, and then the remaining 3 to 10 years where the NHBC will support the customer should there be defects. What I would say, though, is that Taylor Wimpey and many of our peer group retain responsibility through that period and undertake works should they arise. And the NHBC then have a service, an arbitration service, should there be any issues. And ultimately, the customer has the ability to seek redress now through the New Homes Ombudsman. And Taylor Wimpey signed up to the New Homes Ombudsman service. We were one of the very first house builders to do so, and we've had a very strong experience through that process and a learning experience. So there are a number of quality checks and inputs throughout the process, but they start with the house builder and our own processes and engagement with our supply chain, including training, and then the, I think, very significant comfort that the customer will have through the NHBC warranty process and redress through the New Homes Ombudsman.
It's almost amazing there's any problems at all, given what you just set out, the level of the number of stages that go through. It just seems amazing that these so many seem to slip through.
We try to deliver on a right first time basis, and that's not the first time that you've heard that phrase today. You'll have heard that from NHBC, but we do deal with a range of challenges. We are building in the natural environment. There can be sort of topographical changes, weather challenges, and standardisation, which Stephen's already referred to, helps us eliminate some of the points of failure. But I do think that quality has meaningfully improved year on year, but it is a continuous process. And as regulations change, the bar is lifted consistently, and we have to work towards that sort of continuous improvement and raising the bar each time.
Thank you.
Thank you. The government is committed to introducing a new statutory New Homes Ombudsman scheme and a single consumer code. That will mean builders have to sign up to it. How far do you think those changes will go to approving protection for sort of the buyers in our constituencies of new build homes? And what do you think the reasonable timescale should be to allow developers to sign up for it and comply with that new code?
Well, sorry, go ahead, Stephen.
Okay, thank you. So the new Homes Quality Code, which the large house builders already signed up to, already results in us delivering a good quality service. I'd expect the introduction of that being applied more widely across the industry will mean that some of the smaller house builders will need to participate in a way that they haven't done previously. So we need to allow a sensible time for the diversity in the sector to be supported in terms of the application of that as a standard. For the large house builders, I don't think it will be an issue at all. I think we can move very straightforwardly to endorsing that and participating in it. In terms of will it drive up standards, I think that goes back again to one of the points in the earlier hearing, which is about the extent to which that applies across all categories and all tenure types. So ensuring that that standard is used and those and is applied across all tenures, not just open market housing, will be very helpful.
So as I've already mentioned, Taylor Wimpey was one of the early adopters of the new Homes Quality Code and the New Homes Ombudsman Service. I'm also, as is Steve, a non-executive director of the New Homes Quality Board. The process of preparing to sort of join the New Homes Quality Code, was not insignificant. It did require systems change and investment across sort of the large house builders at that early stage, and we could see that some of the peer group took longer to sort of implement those changes. And therefore, I don't think that we can underestimate the increased burden and the time that SMEs and potentially support and education and facilitation to help them engage sort of appropriately with the statutory ombudsman. That said, Taylor Wimpey are very supportive of the ombudsman gaining statutory footing.
HBF the same. We've been encouraging our members for a number of years to register with the New Homes Quality Board. The majority of our larger members have, and a growing number of smaller members, but I think as Jennie just said, there's more challenges at the minute for small developers across a range of different issues in terms of compliance with new and more complex regulations. I think the New Homes Quality Board is working with them. They've dropped the cost to small developers, which at the minute is key. I think the smallest developers now are only paying £300, and that goes up to £5,000 for companies with a turnover of 3 million. So I think it's eminently affordable now. Clearly it takes time. Some of the larger developers, it took quite significant amounts of time to change all the internal processes, how you deal with the required customer journey through a complaints process. So it will take time and education for SMEs, but I think, you know, we need to be, the NHQB has been in position now for a number of years, so I think we need to be moving to a point where it is mandatory within a reasonable time frame.
Thank you. Moving on to accessibility of new homes, Andrew. My apologies.
So we heard about this as well from the previous panel, but the proposal for this 40% of new homes supplied to comply with M42, would you support that, or would you agree with the point put forward, which is that if all homes were required to be to that one standard, there is a sort of simplification across the whole sector in terms of what you're building?
I speak from a Vistry perspective. Our emerging and existing standard house types include properties that are NDSS compliant and meet the quality standards through M42 as well. So we've invested in the lines within our factory that allow us to deliver the timber frames to comply with that. We've had the advantage of many of our existing partners wanting to be early adopters of quality in terms of the affordable housing and to some extent within the build-to-rent sector as well. So it's allowed us to work with them with a degree of confidence in putting our investment into our capital facilities in order to deliver that into our factory facilities. I suspect that it will play a key part of the output of the Social and Affordable Homes Programme in terms of looking for that quality. If it was to be applied nationally, then that would not be a problem from a house building perspective, although there would be a time frame within which everybody would have to adapt towards it. I come back to the basic premise that as house builders we're manufacturers and retailers of homes, and so essentially the additional costs in delivering larger homes, because it's a bigger footprint, would be a burden on the land, not on the house builder.
And just to, I guess sort of perspective in terms of in your experience, how long did it take to make that transition, and some sense of the investment, the cost that might have had at the scale that you're aiming to produce at?
So there is a real advantage with volume. So as you increase your volume, you naturally the costs the additional cost per unit come down. Yeah. So there is there's two aspects to that. The actual cost of delivering an NDSS home is relatively modest if you're dealing with it at volume and it's on a planned basis. The important thing is that it's a level playing field for everybody, because when you then apply that to land, it obviously has a larger land take, and so there are obviously competitive and planning issues that need to be resolved as part of that. I wouldn't put an exact price in terms of the additional cost, because it is very related to volume.
And from the private sector's perspective, or the building largely to a private buyers?
So sort of my distinction would be NDSS, the nationally described space standards, and M42 are different, and they're required to be identified in local plan policy, and therefore the experience around the country is very different. Some local authorities do prescribe either the NDSS or M42, and in some instances M43. Not unlike Vistry, we have designed our standard house type range, the vast majority, to meet those standards because of the significant differential that we see around the country. I would say that whilst there is some benefit in volume, the land take and the land cost, the inefficiencies and challenges that come with delivering M42, for example, in areas that have more challenging topography, can be quite expensive. And in areas where viability is already challenged with low house prices and increasing cost of regulation, it could be that sort of the final sort of element on a marginal viability. So I think it would be wrong to ignore that there is an inherent cost, and not all that cost is capable of being deferred to a landowner where the land is already at low values. Effectively, you'll just not get any new homes because we won't be able to make it economically economically viable.
So you wouldn't mandate for all homes to be built to the M42 based on what you've just said, but where do you think is a reasonable percentage objective for the government, particularly given the challenges that we do have around the suitability of housing to people's needs and the ageing population, etc.?
I think it's difficult. I think 40% is a challenge for industry as a whole. And I think there's a number of, as Jennie said, I think it depends. There's a lot of it is regional. There's different requirements in different regions. Topography clearly adds cost. All of these things are deliverable, of course they are, but there's a knock-on impact then in terms of viability generally. All of the different asks of recent years that we've seen added on in terms of biodiversity net gain, future home standard, etc., all very worthwhile from a different perspective, but when you add them all together, all the costs that are being layered on, you get to a point where new housing becomes less viable. There was a report by Zoopla last September that said that nearly 2/3 of the country now is not viable to develop. So we've got to look at how we manage all of these costs in totality that are levied by different government departments. Anything on its own is achievable and deliverable, but it has knock-on implications in terms of viability or the volume of affordable housing you can deliver on that site because of the cost, the economics of the site if you're adding on all these costs.
And can you provide, you mentioned that element of regionality, if you like, the impact it has in different parts of the country. Is there the sort of data out there around the estimated cost on M42 and M43 dependent on kind of where you're building or some of those specific challenges? And if so, would that be possible to maybe not provide now, but for the committee just to understand how that varies across?
I think within a home footplate, it would be, consistent, and we, would be able to sort of give a cost within sort of the build footprint. The difficulty does come. All sites are different. The fall of the land, the way that sort of roads access, and that affects fundamental accessibility at the threshold, and that is where some of the most significant costs are experienced. So that is a challenge. There is no doubt, though, that M43 is a much more significant. It's not an incremental increase in cost. It is a substantial increase in cost above M42.
Chris, very quickly.
So I realise the cost doesn't fall on you, as Stephen said, which is why it might be difficult. But there must be some kind of average number we can put on the cost of going up to M42 or up to M43.
Yes, and as I said, I think within the footplate of a typical home, that's an estimate that we can probably provide, but that wouldn't take into account the external challenges, which are often some of the most costly.
I think we've said in the calculations we've done to get to the 76,000 increase over the last 5 years, it's around £2,000 per home. But
M42 or M43?
For M42. But clearly, depending on topography, etc., that will be higher in certain cases.
It's worth saying, back to your original point, Stephen, about it falling on the landowner, and that may be true. When you're putting in for planning permission, the balance is social housing, usually, right? So all of these extra restrictions that we put on, that is either going to come up of homes not being built or a decrease in the number of social homes being built, right?
So you're absolutely right, and we've seen the impact of that most recently with the adjustments within London to to allow for amendments to affordable housing delivery under Section 106. I think it's important to distinguish supply between greenfield sites and between brownfield sites where it's particularly difficult and where there are topographical issues or other issues that impact on viability. I'd also distinguish between the delivery of affordable homes using grant funding and those which are a function of the viability of a site based on a Section 106 or planning obligation. Those are two quite different issues that will impact. But fundamentally, the regulatory burden, the cost of development, does essentially through the viability processes that house builders go through, it does result in a residual impact on the land. So whether it's public sector land or whether it's private sector land, eventually the land takes the strain. And I think is the system that we have in the UK, that is what's going to happen.
Sure, they're words that will repeated back to you next time your Vistry turns up to a planning committee and says that it's got to drop the social housing requirement, right?
The reality is, if I may, Chair, so the reality is absolutely that from our perspective, if viability results in a reduced percentage of Section 106 affordable housing, then we would look to maintain levels of affordable housing delivery through the use of grant. So that's a separate issue from the issue that is about viability in terms of Section 106.
So even in the use of grant, I think just the last area is just in terms of that viability. I think, Stephen, you mentioned that some of the new changes coming through, whether it's the future home standards, some of the regulatory impact, building safety, electric vehicles, all of that is having a big cost. And I think you quoted to say that the viability of the house building is under acute pressure due to a mixture of costs. And I think about the emails we receive as parliamentarians where essentially in some of these new developments, residents see many developers coming to committees, agreeing to one thing, and then a few months down the line they'll argue that it's not viable, we have to reduce the element of social housing being provided. When I think about the impact, the waiting list of people on the housing waiting list, number of people trying to get onto the housing ladder, those costs, the money they're spending on renting, but yet they'll see, if they were to look at the accounts of many developers, they'll see profits. So they'll think, why is there the issue in terms of viability still coming up?
I think from a simplistic point of view, I can see the argument in terms of, any private company's got to make profit. If they don't make profit, they're not going to be in existence. Levels of affordable housing, if you're reliant on the private sector to deliver your affordable housing, we've moved to a model now where 30 years ago affordable housing was paid for by local and central government. Yeah. You're now relying on the private sector to produce the majority of it or deliver the majority of it.
With some access to grant.
Absolutely, with some access to grant. But you have got to make that an economically attractive deal for the developer to be able to deliver. Ultimately, the land seller will only accept a certain reduction on what they want to sell. A farmer or somebody can only sell a piece of land once, so there's a limited level of flexibility in what the land seller will sell the land for. So the developer has to make a level of profit. And if the affordable housing requirements need reducing, then that's the only way you can do it. Because you've added on, we've got a new building safety levy being proposed for later this year, which will add another £3,000 per home.
But you look at the fact that tragically 72 people lost their lives because of some elements of building safety. Would you not say for future developments we should always make sure we do not, under any circumstance, compromise on building safety?
Absolutely, and the building regulations allow for that. And that's not quite what the building safety levy is being set out for. The future home standard is expected to add another £11,000 per home. We've seen biodiversity net gain at £6,000 per home. So all of these things are absolutely justifiable in a different way, but the whole economics of the development changes when you add on these costs, and so something has to give, and in some instances that has to be the percentage of affordable housing that's delivered.
What changes would you want the government to consider in terms of the way they are bringing in these regulated changes to essentially help to minimise the impact that developers and house builders will have to pick up?
We need to see a moratorium on the new taxes, levies and policy costs that are added on to development. We need to see a pause on the building safety levy. The landfill, we saw a new landfill tax brought in through the budget. So we need a moratorium on new costs being added on, and a review of the costs that have been laid on over recent years to work out, which ones are absolutely necessary. Because, if we want to get to 3 million homes, we've got to find a way to make more development viable. I'll go back to the Zoopla report that says over half the country now is not viable to develop. So you're never going to get to 3 million unless you change that balance.
Any further comments?
I mean, I'd really make the comment that from a planning sort of perspective, we can see, for example, in the recent consultations for the MPPF, the suggestion is that viability assessments should be undertaken at a local plan process, but that local plan process takes years. The subsequent planning application process takes years, and therefore the economic climate, the cost of regulation can have meaningfully changed from point A when a site was proposed at a local plan to the point of delivery. So the understanding the timescales that are taken to bring forward developments and how economic circumstances, regulatory costs and other issues can apply, I think is important. And because there is a very structured approach to what's called the hierarchy of mitigation, building regulations and regulatory requirements are absolute, and so there is no flexibility. So our environmental sort of impacts have to be mitigated. So the scale of hierarchical requirements over the delivery of affordable housing is very significant. And unfortunately, affordable housing then becomes that compressible element, because all the other elements are fixed in regulation.
Stephen.
I think, I agree with that. I think rather than repeat the issue around the regulatory burden, I think it's two things I would add. We're discussing this as large-scale house builders who have large volumes of delivery. The regulatory burden is particularly difficult in terms of SME, and so it's very important that we consider the diversity in the sector and that we take actions to support and interventions politically to support the divergence of the sector and small and medium enterprises. And I think part of that is also about signposting the changes, the regulatory changes over time, because we've also heard about the impact on land that is owned and in flight and already being commissioned to deliver homes. Ensuring, and we've also heard about land taking the strain, I think it's important to signpost things in advance so that is the process that works through rather than impeding delivery over the near and short term.
Thank you very much. I think you've given us a lot of food for thought in terms of the industry's ability to help the government in terms of delivering that 1.5 million target, but still ensuring that we have a robust framework and safety isn't compromised in the process of building those homes. Thank you for coming before the committee this morning.